I'm joined by Labour's shadow Levelling-Up Secretary Lisa Nandy. But first, Lisa, I'd like to talk to you about your reaction to that news from Channel 4 not being sold and to remain publicly owned. Can you tell us what you make of that decision?
Well, it's the right decision, and it's an enormous relief that the government has dropped these crazy plans to try and flog Channel 4 off to the highest bidder. Channel 4 is one of the crown jewels in terms of having a presence in all of our nations and regions, in terms of supporting the independent production sector in this country and making sure that every part of this country is reflected in our national story. It would have been a huge act of economic vandalism to sell it off to the highest bidder, and it's a relief that the government has finally seen sense and backed down.
Right, so let's then move to Keir Starmer's speech just now, just a short while ago in the last hour. We ran that live here on Sky News. I was listening in. He's clearly trying to pitch himself as a man of the people. He talked about understanding and empathising with the shame of not knowing what it's like to pay bills, clearly pitching himself as the complete opposite of Rishi Sunak, who is a multi-millionaire, trying to appeal to everybody. But can he really appeal to everybody in Britain?
I think so, because he respects the contribution that people have to make. And that's the key message from this speech today, that if this country is going to work our way out of this crisis that we're in, where nothing is working, where everything is broken after 10 years of decay and decline, then it's going to take a nation. And that's why the first act of a new Labour government will be to introduce an Act of Parliament that pushes power out of Westminster and Whitehall, that enables local communities to take control of their own destiny, to drive growth, to start to rebuild our public services. The Tories think you can grow the economy by the few, for the few. We say it takes a nation, and that's what we're setting out today.
OK, so let's talk about the nitty-gritties and the details, because Keir Starmer was critical of the Tories for providing commentary without solution. Rachel Reeves told us on Sky News on Breakfast this morning that every policy you've come up with has been costed and funded clearly trying to deflect previous criticisms. But we didn't really hear much of what Sir Keir plans to do. You mentioned one reform law there. You know, there was no who, what, when, why, how.
Well, just to give you an example, we believe that this country could do far better if we moved to cheaper renewable energy and ended our dependence on energy from Russia and from other authoritarian countries. We think that that will create good jobs in every part of Britain, and we're setting out a long-term plan to do it. No more sticking plasters, no more lurching from one short-term solution for a crisis to another. That's the approach that the next Labour government is going to take. And everything that we promise, we will cost and we'll know that we can deliver, because that's what the British people expect and that's what they deserve.
OK, so do you think, though, that the party can hold on till the next election, really? Because, you know, the polls are tricky and it's tough sometimes to keep an electorate so convinced and to keep such highs.
Look, it's up to the British people. We would never be as presumptuous to believe that the next election is a foregone conclusion for anybody. But I think wherever you go in this country, people can see that this country needs a plan. Nothing is working. The government hasn't got a grip. Whether you walk into your local A&E or you walk down your local high street, you can see that things are falling apart. But we know that they can be different. We know that because across this country, in every community, there are local leaders, there are business people, there are communities who are coming together to build. And the next Labour government is going to hand them tools to do that, whether it's powers over skills, transport, job centres, housing. These are the things that enable places to thrive and enable this country to succeed again. And we're going to hand those tools back to communities as a partnership between government and the people, so that we can build the country that we know that we can be.
I was interested to hear Sir Keir talking about taking back control, the fact that when he was talking to people around the country about remaining on the Leave vote, on the Brexit vote, that there was a lot that he couldn't argue against, and so he appreciates that. He's trying to clearly appeal to both sides, Leavers and Remainers, and once again I ask you, is that possible?
It is possible. This country needs to move forwards. We found multiple ways to divide ourselves from each other over the last few years, whether it's arguments about independence in Scotland and the growing nationalism across England, whether it's the Brexit divisions that we've been scarred by for so long. But actually, when we come together, we build a country that works. And I think the prevailing mood of the times is that people want this country to move forward. We want to start to rebuild our public services, get staff back into the National Health Service, get our buses and our rail networks working again, and get people a decent pay rise. And all of these things are only possible if we take a long-term approach. We make promises that we know that we can deliver and don't make promises that we can't. And we involve all people in all parts of Britain in helping to rebuild our country.
I'd like to ask you about the strikes at the moment. It's being called the Tory party's winter of discontent. Rishi Sunak planning to present some laws that ban strikes. Do you support striking action?
I absolutely support the right to strike, but I desperately wish this wasn't happening. And so do the nurses, the postal workers, the paramedics, all of the people at this country at the moment that are struggling to keep their public services going. We need the government to sit down and get round the table and start to treat our frontline workers as partners in our national endeavour, not as enemies. And these laws that the government are proposing are the last act of an absolutely desperate government who understand the price of everything but the value of nothing. Our frontline workers are going to help us build our way out of this crisis, and the government needs to sit down with them, treat them as partners and work out a plan.
OK, Lisa Nandy, Shadow Levelling-Up Secretary for Housing and Communities as well. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.